Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back down the rabbit hole. I am Monty Hook and I'm here in the studio in Bali today, joined by Aaron Kleiderman. How are you, brother?
Yeah, good, man. Good
Thank
to be
you.
here.
Thank you so much for joining. I've had your lovely partner, Chantel Raven, in and had a beautiful conversation. And so I thought it was time to get you in, and you guys speak about very similar kind of things, but from different perspectives. You work with men. You call yourself a transformational tantric coach, and you're a coach for men in different capacities and do speaking and run events around the world, and trapped here in Bali, poor guy.
Terrible.
So how do you explain what you do? Like, what are you known for?
I'd say more than anything, I support people to integrate and do their best at mastering the human experience.
Yeah.
I went from navigating ships to navigating souls. So my background is a merchant mariner.
Really?
Operating big.
So is that like you're the captain of a ship, or you?
Yeah, I have a 1,600-ton master's license.
Yeah.
A big ticket chief mate license, so
Yeah.
I can operate ships of any size, of any tonnage, and did that. Went to a maritime academy back in the United States.
I almost went to maritime. I grew up on a boat.
Oh, really?
In Australia,
All right.
yeah. So it was something it was obvious for me to explore. Glad I never went. But
Yeah, and it's when I was on a ship at 18 years old, I'm heading to the Iraqi war. It's kind of where I found my soul for the first time. Had a moment of wanting to jump overboard at about 2 a.m. Just had all this trouble and confusion and chaos in my brain and my from all my childhood. And in that moment of not jumping overboard, thank God, went back to my computer and just started to have a conversation with my higher self, a deeper knowing inside.
Did somebody teach you how to do that, or is that just something that kind of flowed through you at the time?
It just kind of happened. I'd always 4 or 5 years before that, I had counseled my father out of his gambling addiction in like a 2.5-hour conversation. He'd always lost all of his money to gambling, and it was kind of like the bad thing in the family that no one wanted to talk about. Right. And as a 14-year-old kid, I was just like, all right, like let's sort this out, Dad.
So did you have a really strong awareness of how that was impacting the family dynamic, or were you just really insightful and intuitive and picked it up?
It was a combination of that. Like I saw, my parents at various times were living on food stamps. We lost our house. They went bankrupt. There was a lot of different layers of things. And what I saw most consistent was my dad's, scratching away at lottery tickets and buying mega ball tickets and all the things. And, we'd have money, and they would run a catering business, which was like, big jobs with seafood and all that thing in the summer. And then by the time the winter come, we wouldn't have enough money to pay electricity. So I was like, there's something going wrong here. And I just came from my heart and just spoke to him. And, it changed the relationship with my father from one of like him mentoring me to really us being, mates and supporting one another, which really is the same to this day. I mean, I still talk to him about things, but we really have a beautiful relationship.
That's nice, man. So you always had this gift of how you're supporting people now. Did you kind of know that when you were young? Did you feel that? Or was that just something that you realized later in adult life?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of felt pieces of it. I tried to deny it for a long time. And, there was often friends who would come to me and just kind of share their problems. And they often would say, like, you're the only one that listens, or, things like that. And I did start to really love psychology and human behavior.
Yep.
My choice in going to the Maritime Academy was like, I knew no matter what I did in life, I could get out of university and have a professional license to work half the year and travel and do whatever I wanted half the year. So that's really what I did for a lot of my 20s.
Yeah.
I ended up doing a master's in spiritual psychology, but I would work for 4 or 5 months out on the ship, and then I'd take off 5-6 months and just get lost in the world in all different ways.
So how did you find, because Tantra is one of the tools that you talk about, one of the philosophies that you use in your work. How did you find that? Because it doesn't seem, for a guy who's, working on ships, doesn't seem like a usual kind of path.
Not a normal path.
Tantra.
Well, when I did what led me into my spiritual psychology master's in my early 20s, And I dove deep into the field of personal development. I was still teaching meditation on my boat, and I was very much involved with people. I was part of this book series that was people sharing short stories like "Thank God I was abused," and "Thank God I was raped," and "Thank God my son died," finding gratitude for life's challenges. And I studied with great teachers and mentors, and a lot of it was all kind of maybe heart up, but all kind of, neck up, all consciousness-based, mindfulness-based practices. And I, then went back to working out at sea. I kind of got disillusioned in the self-development world. I said, these people are all joke. They're saying one thing from stage, but their lives are dictating something else. And then later on in my journey, through various different things, I found I had my sex life and I had my coaching life. Throughout all that time, I was still coaching, and after I finished my degree. And then a tantric woman came in my life, and I just felt this unification of the two. And I realized that there was a healing energy inside of sexuality. And the only discipline or lineage that I've come across that actually encapsulates the entirety of the human experience is Tantra. And there's some lineages and things that are only sexuality based and don't really deal with how to balance and equilibrate your thoughts, perceptions, and beliefs. And then, some things are only up in the brain and they don't, deal with emotions or sexuality at all. And so the field of Tantra was really the only lineage I found that could include everything. And that's really what I found for my own healing has supported me when I can step into a container or a place where all parts of me are fully welcome. My emotions, my sex, my heart, my mind, it's all on the table, and there's no stone that's going unturned.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think when it comes to sex especially, there's so much pressure, so much shame, so much, it seems to shine a light on the deepest, darkest traumas and things that are there. And especially like in intimate relationships, it seems to kind of get magnified and really shine a light on that. So as you mentioned before, it seems like that's where the greatest healing can come from. And I know from my own personal journey, some of the things that I've dealt with my own sexuality, that has helped solve so many other things. But I was always looking at the other things and like, this is the symptom of how I'm showing up in life. These are my triggers. This is this. But I was never looking at the sexuality thing. And then you fix that, and it's like all those things just suddenly seem to kind of resolve themselves. Is that something that you observe?
It is. And what I started to notice was in my own life before I started to dive into sexuality and even emotionality, I could understand a lot of concepts, but then my decision making was dictating something else. And it wasn't until I really started to mine into those uncomfortable places in the lower chakras, the lower centers of the body, and really start to be with some of that uncomfortability that I started to notice a shift in my day-to-day world. I started to notice that when, energy was rising up, or if I was feeling triggered by something, or if I was being repelled by something, then that's an actual energetic cells in my system that are responding to often a piece that hasn't been honored or acknowledged in earlier life as a child. And around childhood, most emotions and sexuality is pushed down, and we're told not to, touch our genitals, and we're told not to cry. Big boys don't cry. And so it's like suppression. Yeah. And then we're told, okay, we have to get through the world through logic and mental reasoning. And that plays a part to a certain degree. But a lot of the people I find that reach out to me, they understand all the answers. They understand all the mysteries and they've
read a lot of the books.
They read a lot of the books, but they're like, shit's not changing.
Yeah.
So what I experienced, and I experienced the same, like I understood all these things. I had all the answers. I could talk the big game. But, the zeros in my bank account and like the actuality of me doing this work on the planet wasn't quite in alignment. And then when I started to really give myself permission to get uncomfortable with some of that energy, then I noticed a drastic change. And I noticed not only a change within myself, but also the quality of people that were reaching out for support as well.
Yeah. And so when was this? Like when you discovered this for yourself, like you got that level of power for yourself?
I'd say probably about 7-8 years ago now.
Yeah.
So I've been in this, I did my master's in spiritual psychology back in 2007.
Yeah.
So I've been in this field for a while. And even in that master's degree, it was like they didn't even talk about sex. It wasn't even on the table to deal with. It's like, oh yeah, just don't have sex because that's bad, you know. And it's just there's not a lot of education around it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because we're having this conversation. We're existing on this planet Earth because semen and egg came together to create life. So
there's no conversation around it.
There's no conversation around it. It's bad, Abstinence, religion teaches us, and porn teaches us that women should be wet in 20 seconds, and this is what sex is supposed to look like. It's pretty messed up at the end of the day.
So how did it get so messed up? Like, why is it so suppressed? Like, why is the reality or the authenticity of what's actually the real human experience, why is that not alive?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think there's a few pieces to that. One, a fully awakened, empowered sexual being, I think, is a little bit scary for society.
I think it's scary for ourselves as individuals as well.
For sure, because that's life force energy. When we learn how to move life force energy, kundalini energy, from the base of our body to our crown, and from our crown back to our base, and we learn how to circulate and to be our own self-healers with our sexual energy, there's a lot of things that we don't necessarily need in life anymore. There's different,
That's what I'm saying. It kind of a lot of things sort themselves out.
Exactly, because that is life force healing energy. Sexual energy is a healing modality when it's utilized in that way. So I think a lot of people are afraid of it because of its power. And, throughout a lot of history, you could go back quite far, we were actually a bit more sexually free. But as time has gone on, all of these different conditionings has come through that kind of puts sex in a, behind closed doors, lights off, it's inappropriate.
And there's been a lot of mistreatment, and there's been a lot of abuse. So that, probably tends to shut things down as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like the abuse only continues when a proper education isn't there. And especially there's quite a few religions in the world that the sexual oppression is really strong. And you see that with that, there's a tremendous amount of rape, abuse, molestation of not only at the same age, but also of children, because you have all these adults who have never actually been taught how to deal with sexual energy, so they take advantage of those that are there before them.
It comes out in very unhealthy ways. Let me ask you a question. What do women need, and what do men need?
What do women need?
I got other questions in there that asking for a friend, of course. But the reason I ask what do women need and what do men need is because I think unless we're really taught and we go down these paths of learning from people like yourself, it's like we think we know what the other sex needs or what our intimate partners need, but we don't really. We don't really. So, you obviously work with a lot of couples, a lot of singles, and you're probably working with singles because they can't find their ideal partner, and they keep hitting the same roadblocks. And then people in relationships, maybe they really want to try and they're just not gelling. So what is it is missing? Like, what do the women and men need that is not there?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I'll correlate that to kind of the ergonomics that happen in the bedroom, because when we can begin to master how we interact in the bedroom, it actually has a very strong correlation out of the bedroom. In the bedroom, for a woman's pussy, yoni, vagina, whatever word you want to use, to open, her heart has to be open first. And for a woman's heart to open, what she needs is safety, she needs communication, and she needs to feel like her needs and desires and values matter. And so I'd say more than anything, what a woman needs is simply many times just to be listened to and to feel loving presence that doesn't have agenda.
Yeah.
And when a woman feels
the strength, like that strong, grounded
presence.
Yeah.
And when a woman feels that presence, and it's not presence like I'm giving you presents just so I can get underneath your panties. It's like it's just your full undivided attention. I would say 90% of the time of the issues that arise in couples is the woman not feeling like she can communicate, not feeling like he cares about her heart, not feeling like, there's anything happening. Everything is trying to lead up towards sex, and the woman doesn't actually want to open in sex because the man hasn't done any foreplay before the bedroom.
And that's because what he's been taught is from Pornhub.
Porn. Exactly. And I say that about the ergonomics because, and Raven actually may have said this. I initially got this analogy from her, but it's like, imagine a man and a woman, and it's boiling pots of water. And the woman, like, it takes probably 20, 30 minutes for that pot to boil. The man, it's like, he's like ready to go. He's, he gets erect. He's ready to. So, because, and this is the other side of it. And it's actually kind of the cosmic joke. For a man's heart to open, his sexuality has to open. So men like to be touched initially at the genitals. Again, not all the time, but in general, that's the way that works. So it just creates this place where men want more sex because unconsciously they actually know that having deeper connection, sexuality, intimacy is going to make them feel more when their heart opens, and then they feel more and they're like, and how many, can you remember, I know for myself, like one of the first times I really experienced God, or, not a religious God, but just this like massive presence of where I could feel everything in my body, in my beloved, was through lovemaking. And it was after probably 20, 30 minutes of lovemaking. And I was like, oh my God, like my heart is wide open. I can feel so much right now. So that energy is actually just rising up from the base of a man. And then I support a lot of men, especially, to have practices where they can start to move that energy through their body. So their whole body actually becomes orgasmic. So to answer your question, what women really need is to be listened to be loved, to be adored, to feel presence. What men need is a place where their sexuality is welcome and they're not getting condemned for it. And especially in the bedroom. And men need a place where they feel like they can share their desires and they're not going to be, chastised for it, and they're not going to have their balls cut off for it, and that they can just open themselves and feel like they're 100% can be there.
Yeah. Nice one. Do you feel like, do you see symptoms that are happening in the world? I mean, we live in a pretty fucking weird world at the moment. And there's a lot of things bubbling to the surface, that highlight a broken society and broken cultures. And, at the end of the day, humanity is just a global expression of us as individuals. So in many ways, there must be a lot of suppression. There must be a lot of traumas. There must be a lot of things going on with us as individuals for that collective to be experiencing some of the things that we were experiencing. Is that something that you relate to? Like, do you kind of look out in the world and go, oh, there's weird shit happening, with politics and all this because there's some misalignment, or the people don't really understand the sexuality? Like, is there a relationship between those things?
There is, and I'll actually speak into emotions as what I see as a direct correlation of that, because what I feel like is most suppressed in humanity is our own capacity to feel the depth of what's present. And so, when somebody gets into a car accident and they go to their doctor, and what does the doctor do? They might have all these physical body ailments, but they're generally giving them pills. And then let's say a couple months down the road, because they're not back at work, they start to feel depressed, and then they give them more pills. So instead of actually saying, hey, there's some shock in your system, you need to vibrate to your emotional body, and actually, like a dog will do or an animal does when something traumatic happens, they shake their body. So the emotional body, when it's not actively being vibrated and moved and expressed, then it starts to suppress itself in the body, and it comes in the forms of cancer, in the forms of like anger bursts. It comes in the form of all these different ailments. So what I think one of the number one issues that is existing in humanity is people not having a healthy relationship with their emotions. There's like a feeling as though when somebody's happy, we're really happy. But when somebody's sad, it's like,
It's a bad
let
thing.
me go fix them, you know, and a mentor.
Or numb them.
Yeah, let me go numb them. Or, you know, if they're feeling pain, that's wrong. But if they're feeling pleasure, that's great. And, you know, one of the frameworks that I always like to look at that a mentor of mine taught me early on is that our system, we're a bioelectric magnetic being. Like the cells of our body are positive charges and negative charges. So everything inside of this human experience is equanimous. So you cannot have happiness without sadness. You
Can't have one without the other.
can't have one without the other. And yet we get fed this belief that we're going to find the white picket fence where there's more pleasure than pain. Or we're going to find that world where we're just happy all the time and there's butterflies. It's like we're sold illusion. So there's a lot of people chasing their entire life for an illusion that's never going to exist.
Yeah, that's very valuable stuff, and I do in many ways feel like, the answers that we all seek, you know, like, I mean, everything we see in the world are just symptoms, you know, like maybe there's people who are puppet masters who want to vaccinate humanity so they can, you know, depopulate or whatever. Maybe that's happening. If it is happening, I think that is just a symptom of, you know, the sickness that humanity is dealing with, and and this is why the work that you're doing is very important, because I think it answers so many things. It's really very powerful. And I, you know, just relating back to what you were saying before about, you know, when you can tap into this sexual power, that unleashes all the other things that you potentially you thought you were looking for. First of all, you know, like if you want to be financially wealthy, if you want to, you know, if you want to be really fit or whatever it is, I think that's the answer to so many of those things. However, when you can unleash that, you might find, like you said, you don't want those things anymore. Like what you want is actually different. It seems like it's the answer to so many things. Yeah,
and you know, the key for me is integration, meaning that, like our body is often seeking homeostasis. So integration from the place of whatever is out of alignment, when I start to set my intentions or start to move towards the direction of where I want to go, it's naturally going to start to come up to the surface. It's like when people have been eating, let's say, a heavy animal-based diet for their whole life, and then all of a sudden they start eating vegan and they start getting headaches and they're like this. They're like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore.
Vegan's terrible.
It's like, no, your body is detoxifying and I'm not saying vegan is a way at all, but I'm just saying that's an example. Yeah. What I think often happens is that people have had really a lifetime of suppression of really feeling. So what do they reach for? They reach for narcotics, they reach for alcohol, they reach for things that
distractions,
phone. It's all distractions from actually just every day breathing into the belly and just feeling what's alive in the system. Not after coffee, not after, you know, all these other distracting things. Can I just sit with whatever experience and sensation is happening in my body and just notice it? And notice if I need to start thinking about something else. Notice if I need to go do my work. Notice if I need to numb myself. And actually just sit there with it, because TV is going to say something, media is going to say something. Everyone has an opinion that they want you to believe, because when you start believing it, and I also feel this way, like I think there's obviously a lot of things happening in the world, but there's a lot of conspiracies that are being fed, and also there's a lot of bullshit that's being fed on all sides of it, like bullshit and conspiracy and bullshit in terms of it's on both sides, because at the end of the day, no matter what is being fed, when other people start to like it and we get the dopamine hit and they're like, then it starts to feed.
It feeds itself.
It feeds financial models. It feeds everything else. So what I suggest for people is to take an inner inventory for what's actually happening in here and start to have a deeper relationship with the voice of your intuition, the voice of your soul. And where that voice comes from is the integration, the mastery of this human flesh suit.
So how do we do that, Aaron?
Well, I got online courses that help it.
Well, we'll make sure people get a chance to check it out. But what's the 5-minute version?
The 5-minute version is that just like you take an inner inventory of what you have in the groceries, in your shelves before you go to the grocery store, you take an inner inventory of what's happening in my mind. Am I buying into every belief, ideology that's get fed into my mind, or do I have the capacity to witness without judgment? Noticing, as I drop a little bit deeper, am I addicted to needing love? Am I chasing after relationships because I feel like I don't know love inside of me? Yeah. Or am I avoiding love because I'm too afraid to actually feel it? And as I drop a little bit deeper into my emotions, have I given myself permission the last week, month, year to really just let myself feel, or to emote, or to be angry when something has upset me, or to cry, or whatever the emotion is? Or am I resisting my emotional body because I'm afraid of feeling too much? Or is it so shut down by different distractions that it hasn't, everything is numb? And that was a long time, my own life in my childhood, I was completely numb. And then going a little bit deeper into your sexuality, are there edges of your sexuality that haven't been confronted? Are there places where you're like, ooh, like that is...
You've been making yourself wrong? Or...
Yeah, whatever it is, there's so many different layers. Do you think still, like, what are the beliefs and the ideas around sexuality? Is it bad? What's the voice that's still in your head from your parents about what sexuality is, or maybe mother or father or uncle or whatever it is,
or no voices at all?
Or no voice.
In my case, nobody ever taught me anything.
Yeah,
not a single thing.
Yeah,
not school, not my parents, not nobody.
I mean, mine was. We had a sex ed class, and it was showing the most horrific venereal diseases that you could possibly imagine.
I think there was a condom on a banana once. That's about it.
That's about it. And and really getting honest with all of that, getting honest with yourself, because so many times I see in relationship, people are staying inside the comfort zone because they're afraid of getting out of the comfort zone, and then they're
afraid of losing that person, and that becomes the overarching, unhidden, or that hidden need.
Of course, yeah. And so for me, those 4 centers. Any of those 4 centers that are out of alignment inhibits me from connecting to the essence of my soul. Meaning, when I'm able to have, to the best of my ability, integration between my sex, my emotions, my heart, and my mind, then actually, and heart math shows this, when my mind and all my being is more in a state of a 0 point, or an equanimous vibrational alignment, then it creates neural pathways that actually begin to open in the heart. And from everything and I've researched, the heart is most deeply connected to the soul. Yeah. And at the end of the day, we've incarnated for a reason. Whatever that reason is, we've chosen to say, hey, I'm going to go spend the next 70, 80, or 10, or 90, or 100 years on this planet. I know for myself, I'd rather, at the end of that lifetime, while I know I'm going to be, shortly leaving, to look back and say, hey, I loved, I mattered, I gave it my best. I don't want to think back and think, oh, I never actually confronted those sexual shadows, or I didn't feel all the pain of when my mom did this, and my dad did this, or, my boss was still a bastard when I was 25. Damn it. And that's often where people are at. So we grow at the edge of transformation. We grow at the edge of our uncomfortability, not to always be there where our nervous system doesn't know rest and digest, but we find those edges that we can actually begin to expand the spaciousness to which energy can move through us, and then ultimately
those edges just kind of push out.
Yeah, and then inspiration flows. Inspiration meaning in spirit. When I'm inspired, I'm in spirit, and I'm at one atonement, at one-ment with the world around me, with the life around me, and then I can vibrate in alignment with the reason, the purpose for why I've incarnated.
Yeah, I like what you said. I relate to the idea of there's some embodiment between the four centers. I've done a lot of spiritual practice and different things and meditation, and one of my observations of myself is, like especially in breath work, I feel like I can. I'm in whatever my experience is. I'm bridging my spiritual experience with my body experience, and I'm hyper aware of everything that's going on, and I can move energy around. It's like it gives me an access to kind of bridge these worlds. And I think, especially when you start out on personal development or you start learning these things, all these things are very separate. It's like meditation is just a tool that I'm going to use. And especially sex. We think of sex as just something that we do, 3 times a week or whatever, and just going to get in there and do it for 20 minutes and, job's done. We don't view it as being something that is part of us or part of our lives, right?
Yeah.
And so I really relate to what you're saying there. I think it's more profound than what it sounds.
Yeah, and what I love is, as a mariner, one thing I know, it's like anytime you're on the bridge of a ship, you need to have the tools with you to be able to handle the different things that life or the ocean or the environment throws at you. So all of these different practices and modalities are all tools that we get to keep on our tool belt. We know how to move our emotional body. Okay, I'm triggered. I'm going to go beat the fuck out of a pillow. I'm needing to state my desires more. I'm claiming more of my truth. I have a lot of stuff happening in my mind. I need to just go right crazily just to release some of my unconsciousness or my subconscious, unconscious mind. So all of these are tools that support, for me, the mastery of the human experience. And I, again, relate that. I often utilize maritime and soul terminology quite similarly, because when we're a captain of a ship, we need to know all of the different resources that we have at hand. Am I thinking about what I'm feeding my body? Am I attuned to my breath entering all the way into my belly? Can I take in all of the resources that are here so that at the end of each day, it's like, okay, I've used what I have and I'm making a difference, whether it's to myself, to another, to 100, to 1,000, to 1,000,000, doesn't matter. It matters in the alignment to how an individual is showing up day after day into the world.
Nice. So you mentioned before that you think that there's things going on in the world. What it's called a rabbit hole. What do you think is going on in the world? Like you mentioned before that you can be on the side of a conspiracy theory, but in some ways you've bought into that narrative and you've bought into that fear. Or you can be like, everyone's a conspiracy theorist and, I'm going to vaccinate myself so I can protect myself from you conspiracy theorists. And they're in the camp of their fear, but everybody's still in fear, right? So are you kind of aligned to any of the conspiracy theories, or like they're not really conspiracy theories, but what do you get a sense of what's actually going on in the world?
Well, I think there's quite a few things happening for sure. One, a mentor of mine several years ago he was very deep into astrology, some of which I relate with. Some it is another rabbit hole, it is another narrative, but also has some. And he was speaking about this time as being one that like a lot of shit was hitting the fan. So I look at what's happening on the planet and I see it anytime. Like history has shown, there's never a moment with more disadvantages than advantages. There's no time in history where something's happened that there's been more disadvantages than advantages. We cannot exist, like the world would fall apart if that ever happened. It would disintegrate into nothingness. So when I look at all the things happening right now, and I found myself down a lot of different rabbit holes in the last year. And I always like to find where the peppercorn of truth is. Where's the peppercorn of truth inside of what this individual is showcasing, putting out? And I think
because maybe they've taken it too far.
I think sometimes people grab onto one thing and then they're like, this is the thing, and I'm going to make everyone believe that this is the thing. And then on the other side, like I have, and I love having friends who are on all sides of the spectrum.
Yep.
Like that really supports me to
Check
like
yourself.
even, the vaccine conversation. I have friends that are like, absolutely 100%, I'm absolutely getting a vaccine and I see it for X, Y, and Z. I have other friends that are like, there's no needle that's ever even going to come close to this sphere. And I genuinely appreciate both of them. For me, I tune in each day, like I feel into where, like I'm looking at going back to the US this summer. And even in opening up that whole can of worms and what that, I haven't been back to the US in, be close to 2 years when I go back. And a lot has changed. And what I try to support within myself is the capacity within me to be a primal creator. Meaning I want to take awareness of what all of the different narratives are. And if I have awareness of what all those different narratives are, then I can make a more conscious, aware choice in moving forward.
Yeah.
And I do feel there's a lot of chaos happening. I do feel like there's some different agendas and different things that are happening on a higher level that is being implemented.
What are they?
Well, when I look at the place of what's happening on a population level, and I'm sure people listening might not totally love what I'm going to say, but having a decrease in population isn't the worst thing for this planet. And I'm not by any means saying that we need to go out and kill people.
Yeah.
But if there are narratives that are dropping into our reality that are having that effect,
Yeah.
and the effect that it's having with an older population dying, again, I'm not promoting that, but I'm also just seeing that is a reality that has, and again, whether this virus is man-made, whether it came from an animal, at the end of the day,
it still came from nature in some way.
It did, yes. And at the end of the day, the earth is always going to reach equanimity. That's the principle that guides my everyday life. So I know no matter what's happening, there's going to be an equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah.
With every energy and matter cannot be created nor destroyed, it just changes form. But I know that the moment I jump down a rabbit hole and I start to feel fear or tension in my body, then there's something about that rabbit hole that's giving me an opportunity to own that inside of me.
Yeah.
And this is where I feel like spiritual principles are taking effect in the day-to-day life. If I'm judging a whole group of people as bad, terrible, I need to look at the characteristics of what they embody and own that within me. It doesn't mean I need to do what they're doing, but I have to own that energetically if I can hold a greater spaciousness of true, authentic embodiment within me. And that's ultimately what I feel like is the guiding principle. Because our minds are going to make 1,000,001 stories. It's always going to be there. And there's every side of the story can be 100% validated.
Yeah. And especially in times like now, like the stories are just amplified and people buy into it so hard. I do relate to what you're saying because I've had this conversation with myself, right, and with other people. But I'm on the side of I definitely feel like there are some people in power who have the capacity to have some level of control and power over society and steer it in directions which is for their personal interest in this incarnation of who they are in this lifetime. But I also agree with the idea that, okay, if people are trying to depopulate the world or whatever, they're still part of nature. Like the earth, Mother Nature is the ultimate. Like we can't beat her. We can't overcome. So in some ways that also has been chosen. And I know that's a very difficult concept for people to grasp. And that's why I try very hard not to. I'm very outspoken about vaccines because I've never been vaccinated, and I definitely don't think people need to be vaccinated against the coronavirus. I don't. I'm not anti-vax. Just with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really interesting way to think about it because And I think this is also why this stuff is happening, because it's giving us an opportunity to go to the extremes. Like, people are going from one extreme to the other, and it's when you can do that you can come to the center and realize this, that none of that really matters. I can create my own experience, and as long as I'm in tune with my experience and what I can create, like you said, as being the ultimate creator, then it doesn't really matter what's going on outside. It's not that I don't care what's going on outside and I don't have compassion for people that are dealing with stuff, but it's not going to affect my experience. My experience of how I choose to turn up today is not going to be affected by what the rest of the world is dealing with. And that's not that easy, and I certainly don't get it right all the time. But I'm very quick to have awareness of when I go down those rabbit holes and the stories start. I'm like, hang on, snap yourself out. Yeah.
A few things come to mind in what you shared. For one, I looked at Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, and that capacity inside that no matter how horrific the situation is in front of you, there's a capacity to choose our own reality. And that book demonstrates that very well. The place of, I would say, any fear that I notice inside of me is how quickly in this last year humanity has gotten used to going like this when we walk into a grocery store, of going, check my temperature, check here. And there's an entrainment that so quickly has happened in humanity in this last year that the only way that I can enter into a place is getting my temperature and checked. And what fears me about that is if you look at a lot of the sci-fi movies, and I would say almost 90% of them, they always have these different mechanisms inside that are being, you're being traced and tracked.
Yeah.
To enter into a deeper rabbit hole.
They started doing it on the heads, and then they moved it to here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of places in the world, it's still on the head, which is crazy. I had a friend quite a while back send me this scientific research paper that was dialoguing about, different basically chips that could be put into the skin that would be able to track your vaccine record.
Yeah.
And
but that's open. That's public information. People can see those.
It's a scientific research paper. It's out there. It was
people
done.
think that it's a conspiracy theory. No, that's a program that has been developed for over how many years already.
Yeah, exactly. And what gets me is where now with this vaccine conversation, where there's so many countries that are saying, yeah, you're free to do whatever you want, but if you want to go places, then you need to have a vaccine.
If you want your children in school, they've got to be vaccinated.
And that to me is where I feel like the freedom of humanity is being taken away. And as being an American, there's things about the U.S. that drive me crazy. But the state where I have my legal residence is New Hampshire, and the motto of New Hampshire is "Live free or die." Yeah. It's like live free or die, motherfucker. Like I'm going to, and there's still that spirit that's alive inside of Americans that I still really relate to. I mean, I know you're from Australia. My experience with Australia and the creation and where its origins are is from a very controlled format, and you can see that dictated into how they've dealt with the corona. I can appreciate it. The rates have been really low, but as an Australian citizen, you can't leave the country.
Yeah, but and the issue there is that Australia, for the longest time, for the last 5-6 decades, has been known as the lucky country. She'll be right, mate. We've got it good here, and so that's very dangerous because anything could be happening under your nose, and you're just going to have the attitude of "she'll be right, mate."
She'll be right, mate.
Yeah.
She'll be right.
It's and that's why I think 5 or 6 years ago I started feeling very like my intuition was telling me something about Australia. It's like, this doesn't feel right. I'm out of here. And this last year or so has just kind of shone a light on that. So, but a lot of people still think it's the lucky country. It's a beautiful place.
It is.
Australians are beautiful. Nothing against Australians. I'm from Australia, obviously.
I still love it. Don't worry.
Yeah. The other thing, about the symbolism of the taking the temperature. Well, the other one is the mask. I mean, the symbolism of muzzling your voice. Like, it's like, okay, I'm going to either inject you with something or I'm going to scan you, and you can't say anything about it because you've got a muzzle on your face.
You got a muzzle on your face. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I mean, again, another whole rabbit hole, but what masks actually do in terms of the, that I'm sure you've dove into, and it's not.
Actually, this is probably the one thing that I haven't, because I don't think anybody actually believes that they do anything. Yeah. So it's not even worth talking about.
It's not even worth talking about.
Yeah. I want to chat to you a little bit about relationships, because relationships is probably your bread and butter in terms of the retreats that you do and helping people to get to a place where they've got a great relationship with themselves, and that's when they can express it with somebody else. What do you see as being the blockages, or what stops people from having great relationships?
Number one, they don't have a great relationship with themselves. And I say that and I'll relate it back to this equanimous state, meaning we're both in male bodies, but inside of us, there's a feminine essence. There's a masculine essence and there's a feminine essence. And the reason why relationships often are failing is because people are building codependent connections together. So basically, men are often only externalizing their feminine onto their partner. I'm talking about, more straight relationships, but it also happens in guy and bi and gay, etc. And when you externalize a part of yourself, then that part, if that person does something wrong or walks away or doesn't say what you want them to say, then it literally is hurting in your system, and it creates emotional responses because you've externalized that part from within yourself. So the number one thing I feel like is absolute necessity for relationships is our own inner relationship. And that means that we know an inner union, meaning our masculine and feminine are dancing together in a space of connection, harmony, awareness, intimacy. And when that's there, and then you're able to then meet another who can be in that same space within themselves, then the place to which relationships begin to expand grows more and more and more. And I like to call it, like, at that point, you kind of begin to form a sacred union where two individuals in inner union are meeting, and then they're coming together in a sacred union. Well, really, there's then a three-way relationship with God. And again, not a religious God, but more of this essence that unifies both of you together
in the dynamic, in the entity of the relationship,
in the entity of the relationship. And the key to mastering polarity, and what I feel like polarity is the issue that falls apart the most inside of relationships. So a lot of work I'm doing with men, coming from a very alpha male background, a big part of my initiation was having my feminine start to come online more. And my normal relationship patterning was having these very strong, beautiful women come into my life, and still the case now. But I was just externalizing all of my feminine onto them. And then when she would walk away or anything would happen, I would just feel all this resentment and hurt inside.
Ooh, that sounds familiar.
Yeah. And so about, I can't even remember what it was, but my last partner before Raven, she left me crying on a hotel floor in Egypt. And I was just like in this come to Jesus moment. And I was just crying for hours and hours. And about halfway through those tears, I felt my feminine essence like kind of come back to my body and was like, hey, can you love me now just as much as you love to love women? Like, can you love me just as much? And it was like, whoa. And so for the next like 2.5 years, my main relationship was within myself. I still had lovers around, I still had other things, but I was really deepening and letting her grow up more and more and more, because I feel, the most unconscious, the most neglected feminine is in a male body. It's not in a female body. The most neglected feminine that, you hear all this stuff about the feminine is repressed, and it's in a male body, because if you can imagine, she's probably a 7 or 8 year old caged up little girl that never has a chance to really come out. And, if you're living in places like Bali or in Ubud, sometimes she comes out and then she just runs the show, and then the balls leave the the arena.
Yeah.
So what's really passionate for me is supporting men to have a deeper integrative balance inside of that. And now I'll relate that back into polarity, because in my relationship, if I'm in my feminine, whatever that means, if I'm more receptive, and I'm saying feminine as being more receptive energy, intuitive, creative, etc. Masculine, the very nature of masculine energy is we penetrate when we make love. So it's penetrative, it's presence, it's nothingness. Feminine is everythingness. But if I'm in my everything with her and I'm just spiraling around, for our relationship, that doesn't really turn her on much. So what I see happen with men is sometimes they find their feminine and then they just become this like floozy little 12-year-old girl that can't keep their shit together.
They don't know how to make that dance happen
between the two. Yeah. And fair enough, because what often happens is, if you can imagine that caged up little girl, and then you have female bodies who are saying, I need you to feel more. Please feel more.
Yeah.
Why aren't you being more emotional? And so they say that. And then the one moment, the guy who's like, this dude comes out, he's like, and like he's having his vulnerable moment.
Yeah.
And then the woman, if she doesn't have any capacity to witness without judgment and to just hold that young, very tender woman inside, and she, and that feminine inside the male body gets pushed down or chastised in any way, she's going to say, I ain't never going to do that again. That fucking killed me, right? Whatever it was, if she wasn't met with love, appreciation, and really being held in that way. Yeah. So the biggest issue that exists inside of relationships is at the it's at the point where my feminine with her masculine. So it's at the contrasexual self.
Yeah.
So really,
so interesting, man.
In relationships, there's like a foursome happening. You have, like, for Raven and I, like our brothers, we run the business together. We teach together sometimes we're bros, we'll go on hikes and things like that. And it's sweet as it's also the area where, out of all of the different areas, we've had some challenge and some friction, because we butt heads a number of times. I'm alpha, she's quite alpha. And then we have our normal, like her and her feminine, my masculine. And outside of our teaching space, that's about 80 to 90% of the time, that's our relationship dynamic. And then we have our kind of sister relationship. So like my feminine with her feminine, we'll get our nails done together, we'll go shopping, we can kind of be in more of that, well, maybe we'll dance together, just as sisters do, and then the other side is my feminine with her masculine. Yeah. This is the area that has the most issue inside of all relationships, because I'm in a grown, 38-year-old male body, and she's in a...
And nobody ever taught you anything about how that masculine body is meant to be feminine.
Exactly. So she's grown up a lot. And I would say anything that supported me the most in this tantric journey is a deeper maturing of that feminine energy inside. And, for Raven, she's in the body of a, 43-year-old woman but inside there's a masculine essence that's grown up a lot at times and comes out at different times. And so there's things my feminine might like long for in terms of like witnessing without judgment, being held, and that maybe we have our own disagreements. So when that relationship can come more to the surface and can be seen and recognized and start to be nurtured and developed and built up, that's really where relationships start to synergize more and more.
That's so interesting. I've never heard it, talked about this way, because we often hear about women who are acting, too masculine. We hear about that when it comes to some of the things that men and women are dealing with polarities, and we don't understand women because we're too feminine and women are too masculine, and I think that's actually something that's happened through, the last several generations probably. And men don't know how to act. Men don't know how to show up, and there's a lot of confusion. And but we more often hear about women who are being over masculine, but we don't hear about it in the sense of, well, they need to be masculine, but they need to get that dance right. And we never hear about men needing to be feminine, like never.
Get shit done.
Well, especially from Australia, like I don't know how it is in the USA, but I mean, in Australia, there's just like if you're a man, you've got to be a bloke. You've got to be a bloke, and you got to go to the gym, and you got to look like this, and it's just that's how I was, and that's how everyone in my family was, and nobody ever taught me any of that.
Yeah.
So and this is probably that's difficult for people, for men especially the blokey bloke men, to kind of have the concept in mind that, okay, well, your life is not going the way that you want to. You got to embrace your feminine side more.
Don't think. Well, it's funny you say that. Several years ago, I was running a weekend workshop, and one day, the first Saturday was all women, and Sunday was all men. And the Saturday was a lot of these like spiritual seeking women who, want to find out more about Tantra and sexuality. And then Sunday, this particular workshop, literally every single one of the men were just partners from the women from Saturday who basically said, if you want your relationship to last, show the fuck up. So, I enter into this room, and it's like, minors and just blokey bloke guys that probably have never even been in a self-development workshop, nothing. And I'm like, all right, this is going to be interesting. I kid you not, within the first 30 minutes of that workshop, every single man in there was crying. I led them into this beautiful meditation. And I wasn't trying to do this. I wasn't like, I want to make you all cry. It was just like, I created a space that allowed all parts of them to be welcome. And when they felt that, they genuinely felt that in their bodies and their hearts, there was a letting go. And there was like, oh my God, I can take off this mask. Oh my God, I can take off this mask. Oh my God, I'm not going to get judged for this. And it was just,
I don't have to try so hard.
I don't have to try so hard. And all the guys in there, and you could watch them, they were like kind of looking around like, oh, everyone else is crying, so it must be okay. And it was beautiful. Yeah. And it was just like, that's the thing I see. And it warms my heart more than anything when I can see men come into a container, into a workshop, into life, or it doesn't have to be a workshop, but just a space where the mask can be taken off, the layers can be removed, and you can actually just see each other, and all the failure and all the success and all of that doesn't mean anything. And it's just men being men without needing to prove themselves, without needing to do anything other than just show up in their vulnerability and their rawness. Yeah. And I think that alone heals men. It also really heals humanity in many ways.
I think so. Absolutely. Yeah, I've said on the podcast a few times, the world needs more feminine leaders. And it's not necessarily women leaders. It's more feminine leadership. Because I think, there's that overpowering strength of, men that are greedy and trying to rule the world and control the world that we've had for so long. And it just doesn't freaking work. No, it doesn't. I think we do need more women leaders, but we certainly need more feminine male leaders. That's for sure.
We need a world with women leading from their feminine intuition, not leading from trying to be men
or trying to compete with men.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's kind of how it is now, right?
Yeah. And I'm starting to see little pockets of some women really showing up with in feminine leadership, actually like authentic feminine leadership takes a very different.
And they're going to get so demonized, like with the way the world is right now.
For sure.
That's going to be a tough nut to crack. Got a lot of work to do.
Well, and back to what we were talking about before, one of the advantages I'm seeing with all of this COVID is there's a mass awakening happening. There's more and more people who are questioning what they're being sold day in and day out, and they're starting to seek for answers. I mean, I know my business in the last year has just gone straight up. Just so many people are like reaching out and wanting support, and how do I navigate all
and
this?
also people have had the opportunity to sit with themselves for a little bit and give themselves the space to start exploring that and asking those questions and start questioning, why was I in that job? Why was I doing this? And I agree 100%. Like, this COVID period is Mother Nature has dished up the perfect storm.
Perfect storm to brew it all together.
Couple more questions. So, couple of quick ones. Porn or no porn? Good, bad? When is the right time? When is not the right time?
I would say no porn. And coming from as a sailor, when I would go up onto a ship, they'd show me my stateroom. They'd show me where I would eat chow, like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And they asked me, how big is your porn collection? That's pretty standard operation when you get on a ship. So I had I probably should say a porn addiction at times in my life.
Yeah.
I've yet to, I'm not thoroughly seeking, but I've yet to really find a lot of conscious porn. I feel like porn sells a narrative for both men and women that's very unrealistic to the way in which true, authentic connection happens inside the bedroom. And I think the more people just take a long recess from porn, and then, I did this, I didn't watch porn for probably 7-8 years, and then I found some on a hard drive maybe a year or two back. I put it on, I looked at it, I'm like, this is actually terrible. I'm thinking back to all the, masturbation sessions. It's like, wow, there's a very different being that's watching this now. It's very interesting to observe. So,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, especially as a single guy, like, you got to figure out, and that's the hardest time, like, figure out how to turn off the porn. I think if there is a time, maybe it's when, two of you are aligned and, you can enjoy it together, perhaps. But I definitely think as a single person, it's disconnecting you from something.
And there's such a, I support a lot of men to have a healthy self-pleasure practice and without porn. And when you literally start to rewire the way in which the body is receiving touch and pleasure, and you do that within yourself, that for me changed my relationship with porn.
Cool. One final question for you, but before we do that, I want to make sure people can check you out. Best way to get in contact?
You can
Instagram, follow. We'll make sure people got the links to your socials and
the Soul Navigator, which is kind of complementary to my life's journey. You can go to aaronkleinerman.com. Has all the retreats and workshops, and then the academy that Raven and I run is Embodied Awakening.
That's
Academy.
Here in Bali.
Yeah, here in Bali. I mean, it pre-COVID, we were doing all over the world. We'll go back to that whenever things are quote normal. Who knows? But we do a lot in Bali right now.
Cool. Yeah, we'll make sure everyone's got the links and checks out more of your stuff. So, this has been really very insightful conversation. I'm glad I got you on. One final question. If you had the one-time superpower of mental telepathy and you could share a message with all what's currently probably around 7.8 billion, it might be 6 billion next year, but if you could share a message with all of humanity, one short message that you would like to leave with people, what would that be?
I would say you're worthy of love exactly the way you are, and stop trying to be somebody else, because there's an innate guru and genius inside of you that's waiting to share its creativity and genius into the world.
Beautiful, man. Very powerful. Thanks very much. Guys, make sure you go check out Aaron, and see you next time back down the rabbit hole. Do get in touch if you want to chat, want to give some feedback, or you want to get in contact with Aaron. So, guys, thank you very much.
Thank you, brother.